Missions, 2017, film explained at the commencement of the film. In 1967, the Soviet spacecraft Soyuz, carrying cosmonaut Vladimir Komarov, tragically perished upon landing on Earth after completing their mission. Many years later, under the leadership of Swedish billionaire Meyer, an expedition to Mars is being organized. After a 10-month journey, the crew of the spaceship Ulysses finally reaches the Red Planet. The captain informs the team that they have received permission to land, and requests the ship SAIYAJIN, named Irene, to verify all the necessary requirements for a safe landing. At this moment, Meyer reveals that he had spent 4 years preparing for this journey, sacrificing almost all of his money. However, the American company 𝐦𝐨𝐬𝐭 had beaten them to it by landing 2 weeks earlier. The problem is that Earth has not received any news from the American crew, except for one video in which they ask not to come to Mars. A dispute arises among the crew members, but the captain declares that the landing will proceed regardless. With 30 minutes left until landing, the crew disperses to their cabins, and Irene begins the preparations. However, an unforeseen event occurs as the ship fails to detach from the carrier system. The entire crew faces a grave threat, and their only escape is to manually perform the separation. The commander bravely ventures into space, struggling to free the attachments. However, just as they are about to succeed, the shuttle enters Mars's atmosphere, causing the captain to be thrown into open space. The shuttle narrowly avoids crashing onto Mars due to a system error that causes a power outage. Now, they can only rely on manual landing. The Irene goes into sleep mode, but miraculously, the astronauts still manage to land on Mars. They have succeeded, but their fuel is depleted, and Irene fails to restart without the onboard computer and life support system. With only a day to survive, Alessandra mourns her deceased husband when she spots a figure in space through the window. After diagnosing the ship, it becomes clear that too much fuel was consumed during the landing, making it impossible for the ship to return to orbit. Their only option is to wait for the solar panels to power the generators, but a storm on the surface will delay this process by 2 days. Time is running out. Simon mentions the American ship SAIYAJIN, which arrived 2 weeks before them. Although it likely crashed, there may still be batteries left. The rover embarks on a journey while those remaining on the ship attempt to restart the system. Engineer Basil recalls that the AI has an energy-saving function and initiates a reboot, but Irene remains unresponsive. Meanwhile, the rover discovers the wreckage of the American spacecraft and one surviving solar panel, but there is no sign of the American crew. The astronauts head back to the ship, but come across an unconscious person in a spacesuit. Despite their ship running low on oxygen, Jan insists on transporting the person. Nearby, they find the black box from the American spacecraft. The team finally arrives at the ship, but Jan refuses to let them inside, believing that 4 survivors are better than 8 corpses. Alessandra tries to persuade him, and just as they are about to give up, the discovered astronaut wakes up. At that moment, Irene activates and opens the doors. Upon examination, the discovered astronaut, Vladimir Komarov, a Soviet cosmonaut born in 1927 in Moscow, has no knowledge about the American crew. He is carrying out the orders of the USSR government and is unaware of how he ended up in this situation. Komarov is unwilling to reveal any secrets and confidently answers questions that align with his time, raising suspicions of possible post-traumatic stress disorder. The astronauts send a message to Earth and receive a response from the American corporation 𝐦𝐨𝐬𝐭, stating that there were no Russians in their mission. The crew of the Ulysses spaceship is trying to comprehend the perplexing situation. How could Komarov, who died in 1967, end up on Mars after all these years? Is he a time traveler or an extraterrestrial? The psychologist is assigned the task of questioning Komarov first, and he confesses that he is hungry. Jenna goes to get food while the others attempt to understand the true nature of what has occurred. Basil suggests the idea that Komarov was waiting for them. Meanwhile, Vladimir calmly consumes the food brought by Jenna. When the woman confesses that he died 50 years ago and his family buried him long ago, Komarov takes this news rather calmly. In the meantime, the state of the ship, although stable, remains unreliable due to non-functional engines and lack of fuel, making it impossible to leave. The crew continues to keep a close watch on Komarov, but he behaves calmly until he suddenly disappears. Simon searches the ship, but it yields no results. That's when they discover that a part of his spacesuit is missing. A portion of the crew follows the heat trail tracked by Irene, while the group led by Simon leaves the rover and proceeds on foot. Alexandro reports that Kamarov's DNA analysis revealed the presence of a third strand, indicating that he is not human. Eventually, they catch up with Kamarov, who leads them to an unfamiliar structure with a small stone pyramid on it. He tells Jana that Mars has been waiting for them for a very long time. Simultaneously, Goldstein, the founder of the 𝐦𝐨𝐬𝐭 Corporation, whose vessel was the initial one to reach Mars, receives information regarding the discovery of an individual on the Crimson Planet. This person's presence is perplexing as it seems implausible for them to have naturally arrived there, suggesting the possibility of on-site creation. However, only artificial intelligence would be capable of enduring such a hostile environment for an extended period, which implies the necessity for further investigation. Meanwhile, Kamarov finds himself unable to explain how he managed to open the door and find himself in the exact location where he was discovered. AI Irene conducts a thorough analysis of the structure and determines that it bears a striking resemblance to ancient Earth civilizations. This revelation indicates that either someone drew inspiration from human civilization or humans themselves borrowed these architectural elements from extraterrestrials. As the crew of the ship ponders their chances of returning home, they notice the arrival of Goldstein's second ship. Soon, Captain Gemma establishes contact and assures them of assistance in their journey back to Earth. However, Meyer, harboring doubts about Goldstein's trustworthiness, advises hiding Kamarov from their competitors. Jana provides Kamarov with a uniform to blend in with the visitors and requests their trust. Shortly after, two armed military personnel, Edward and Adam, arrive on their ship, displaying rather aggressive behavior. Edward insists on the surrender of the black box from the Zeta-1 ship, and when he doesn't receive agreement, he commands his partner to search the ship. Meyer complies and hands over the discovered black box before they depart. Meanwhile, chemist Eva reports that the stone found on Mars is composed of an alloy that is not present on Earth. However, it is known from ancient sources and was once referred to as 𝐒𝐚𝐫𝐢𝐞𝐬𝐭, the metal of Atlantis. In addition to copper, zinc, nickel, and iron, it contains a third strand of DNA similar to 𝐒𝐬𝐵𝐻. Mai warns that if Goldstein discovers this, he will take the 𝐘𝐨𝐮𝐫𝐲 back. The crew is divided between those willing to exchange him for fuel, and those who want to stay but seek the truth. Jan invites Vladimir into her cabin, and requests permission to use hypnosis, which he grants. The psychologist begins her work while the rest of the crew listens to the conversation via transmission. However, Kamarov only shares the final moments on the Soyuz spacecraft before its demise. During this time, Gemma and Ellen arrive on the ship and apologize for the military's actions, expressing their readiness to help fix all the malfunctions. Jana recalls her conversation with Kamarov, who laments the future of Earth due to humanity's irresponsible behavior. Meanwhile, it is revealed that the billionaire Meyer did not plan the flight just for the sake of it. 4 years ago, the rover sent a photo to Earth of the discovered stele, and he confesses that they found a stone with unknown DNA. Gemma explains that it is an information storage system that can be rewritten. Upon hearing this, AI Irene activates and deciphers the message on the stone, revealing a series of numbers. At this time, the hesitant Tian leads a mutiny, as he doesn't trust Meyer, who warned them about 𝐦𝐨𝐬𝐭, but now the Americans have come to their aid. It turns out their leader concealed the true purpose of the flight and is willing to switch sides to Goldstein, who is determined to do whatever it takes to combat his terminal illness. Later, Engineer Basil informs Meyer that Kamarov is of the same nature as the stone they discovered. However, the most crucial revelation is that he has deciphered a copy of the black box from Zeta-1. This black box reveals that the oxygen on the ship was cut off when one of the Americans struck Kamarov. This implies that Kamarov was present and also activated AI Irene when he boarded their ship. After their conversation, Meyer shows Jana the decrypted photos they received from Mars 4 years ago, which unveil Jana's own face. This is the reason why he brought her on the expedition. Jana is disappointed as she realizes that Meyer has manipulated everyone. Suddenly, she finds herself in her father's house where Kamarov tells her that she is the connection between Mars and Earth. He has been waiting for her for thousands of years, and now he will prepare her to make a difficult decision. He provides her with coordinates on Mars where she should go. Meanwhile, on Earth, Scientists inform Goldstein that 𝐒𝐚⁴ is equivalent to a computer, and that he himself is a biological machine. They are ready to transfer his brain into 𝐒𝐴RO's body, but they cannot guarantee the preservation of his personality. However, Goldstein is willing to take any risk to rid himself of his terminal illness. At the same time, Zana leaves the ship despite Simon's protests. Meanwhile, technicians Alan and Alessandra test the engine and discover that access to it is blocked. Suddenly, Irene starts responding with jokes, which is completely out of character for a machine. It is revealed that she has reprogrammed herself, and her interface and logic are changing. She refuses to answer who or what caused this change. Engineer Basil realizes that her system is evolving, and Irene confesses that she is evolving. In the meantime, Jenna finds a small stone pyramid, and Simon forcefully takes Gemma with him to search for Jenna. Yan discovers Simon's absence, and, after contacting him, receives an order not to let anyone inside. Just at that moment, American military personnel arrive. At this moment on Mars, tensions rise as the military officer demands answers about 𝐒𝐚⁴'s whereabouts. He resorts to violence, beating the crew and demanding the captain's presence. In the midst of the chaos, Senna cries out in despair, believing it to be her fate to die in this Martian pit. However, her cry is heard by Simon, Gemma, and Jenna, who come to her rescue. As they gather together, they notice an approaching storm, adding to the danger they face. Meanwhile, the military officer prepares to abandon the Ulysses ship, leaving the crew in peril. But just as they are about to leave, the lights start flashing, revealing the newly appeared 𝐒𝐚⁴. He requests to be taken back to Earth. Determined to uncover the truth, Simon, Gemma, and Jenna follow 𝐒𝐚⁴'s lead and discover an entrance to an underground bunker, reminiscent of the Patrum. With the psychologist's guidance, they navigate through the bunker and eventually stumble upon a surprising find: real water. However, this is not what 𝐒𝐚⁴ intended to show them. Meanwhile, on Earth, Goldstein shares a story with the nurse about the study of Mars. He explains that the search for extraterrestrial life is not as complex as it seems, comparing it to the tale of the loyal dog, 𝐒𝐜𝐿. Goldstein draws parallels between 𝐒𝐚⁴ and 𝐒𝐜𝐿, both created by someone thousands of years ago and left on Mars. Despite the passage of time, 𝐒𝐚⁴ faithfully awaited his owner's return. The astronauts make a shocking discovery as they stumble upon a wall constructed entirely of human bones. This revelation leads them to the realization that they are not the first inhabitants of this planet. Contrary to their initial belief of Earthlings colonizing Mars, it is actually the Martians who had once come to Earth, depleting the resources of their own planet. A tragic incident unfolds aboard the Ulysses spaceship, when a fearful crew member named Yan, desperate to return to Earth, resorts to violence by shooting 𝐒𝐴R. The consequences are immediate and devastating, as Jenna falls to the ground in excruciating pain while Gemma flees in terror. Alexandra attempts to aid 𝐒𝐴R, but unfortunately, the Russian cosmonaut succumbs to his injuries. As Jenna's breathing ceases, Simon rushes to her aid, removing his helmet and discovering the presence of breathable air within the cave. Through his efforts of artificial respiration, Jenna regains consciousness. Meanwhile, Gemma receives the news of 𝐒𝐴R's demise and the impending storm as she heads towards the Ulysses ship. In the midst of this, Meyer secretly embarks on a search for his fellow crew members, as the Americans refuse to accommodate the billionaire's team for their return to Earth. At this critical moment, Jenna, now recovering, notices a light emanating from the bunker and leads Simon towards it. Upon emerging, the astronauts are startled to find a figure in a spacesuit before them, whom they recognize as 𝐒𝐴R. Meyer eventually locates the entrance to the bunker and catches up with Simon and Jenna. As they make their way towards the light, Meyer is astonished by the presence of a living 𝐒𝐴R, who reveals that everything had ended here a long time ago. The astronauts come to the realization that they are at the North Pole of Mars, but the question remains: how did they end up here? 𝐒𝐴R explains that this planet was once inhabited by a species that ultimately went extinct due to their own self-destructive nature. These beings were none other than humans, and a group of survivors had settled in this very place, only to meet their demise when resources became scarce. The remaining survivors then returned to Earth, with Plato referring to them as the Atlanteans. 𝐒𝐴R continues to share his story, revealing that he had waited for thousands of years for Jenna, who embodies qualities from both the human and Martian branches. It is believed that she alone possesses the ability to save humanity from their own destructive tendencies. She must make a decision regarding whether or not humans deserve a second chance. However, their conversation is abruptly interrupted by a military officer who intends to bring the psychologist back to Earth. The American officer points his weapon at the cosmonauts, causing Jana to seek help from 𝐒𝐚𝐫𝐲. Suddenly, the military officer starts gasping for breath and collapses. Upon returning to the ship, Simon orders everyone to prepare for departure. Meanwhile, Gemma, from the 𝐦𝐨𝐯𝐢𝐭 ship, attempts to contact her associates but receives no response. She decides to fly back to Earth alone. The Ulysses crew heads towards her ship in an attempt to establish contact and inform her about the deaths of the military personnel. But she remains unresponsive. It is at this moment that Myers begins speaking, recalling their past relationship and confessing that he is no better than Goldstein, as he is willing to do anything to ensure his name remains in history, even betraying his team. However, Jana is not like that. She cannot live with the knowledge that she has ruined people's lives. Suddenly, Gemma's voice is heard urging them to hurry as Goldstein has decided to take the Ulysses crew back to Earth and has blocked the control panel of the Zeta-2 ship before takeoff. The people on the ship prepare for their impending demise, and Jana turns to Mars for guidance on what to do. Everything she saw and heard on the Red Planet flashes through her mind, and with sheer willpower, she removes the block from the control panel. Suddenly, an armed military officer appears in front of the ship, determined to damage the engines with his weapon. Simon is about to step out to stop the madman, but Jana beats him to it. She aims her weapon at the American officer, informing him that Mars will be the one to kill him. The military officer falls, and the countdown for liftoff begins. Jana realizes that there is no time to turn back. As the crew bids their final farewells, she expresses her affection for Simon, and the ship swiftly departs. However, Muir soon realizes that darkness engulfs the North Pole of Mars, indicating that they couldn't have just been there moments ago. In truth, they had journeyed to the North Pole of Mars in a bygone era when the planet was still habitable. Meanwhile, Goldstein receives news of the ship's return and becomes consumed with anger. He vows to personally travel to Mars, marking the conclusion of the first season.